All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Further evidence for the defense?
Yes, sir. The defense is next going to call Miss Claudia White James.
Did you put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Please be seated.
All right, Ms. D.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Miss James. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury? Tell them who you are.
Well, my name is Claudia James. At the time, I was Claudia White.
And where do you live, Miss James?
I live near Reno, Nevada.
And what do you do for a living? What do you do out there in Reno?
I work for a major warehouse company.
Okay. And how long have you been in Nevada?
Almost 15 years.
And you mentioned that your name is different now. Does the change of your name have anything to do with why you relocated to Nevada?
Yes, I married my husband out there.
And before you moved to Nevada, where did you live?
I lived in Holly Springs and Raleigh.
Okay. So you lived here in Wake County before you moved to Nevada?
Yes.
And back in the early 90s, where were you living?
Early 90s, I lived in the Raleigh area, over around Hairsnipe Court.
Hairsnipe is spelled H-A-R-N.
H-A-R-E-S-N-I-P-E.
Okay. Hairsnipe. And when you were living at the townhouses on Hairsnipe Court, did you ever have a chance to meet Travion Smith?
Yes.
And how old was Travion then?
He was a child, a little baby. Very young.
So young that you would call him a baby.
Yes.
And what was the name that you knew him by?
Pico.
And did you also know Pico's mom, Antoinette?
Yes.
And what was the name you knew Antoinette by?
Tony.
And did Tony and Pico live with anybody else in their townhouse there on Hairsnipe Court?
He had a brother.
And did Aaron sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. So Tony and Pico and Aaron lived in one townhouse on Hairsnipe Court, and you lived in another one of those.
Correct.
And did you have concerns when you were living there about the conditions that Pico and Aaron were living in?
Yes, we did.
And what sort of concerns did you have?
Well, there were times when they were without food, without heat, without hot water, running around with diapers on that were so soaked it was unreal. Out in 60-degree weather when they should have clothes on and just have a diaper on.
So you had concerns that had to do with the fact that you didn't think there was enough food in the house, and that their diapers were obviously soiled. Is that something you remember noticing one time?
I noticed quite a bit.
And they would be outside running and playing when you felt like the weather would have suggested clothes were a good idea.
Correct.
And was there generally somebody supervising them?
No. A lot of times they were by themselves, or if one of us would get them. We would be the ones taking care of them.
When you say you would get them, you would be the ones taking care of them, how long would that go on?
Sometimes a couple of days, sometimes just for a few hours. It depended on Tony and her, what she was doing or what she wasn't doing.
So when you say the kids would be unsupervised, that would not be necessarily just for a few minutes or a few hours, but could last longer than that?
Correct.
And you say we, were there other neighbors?
There was a lady who, one of my friends that lived next door to me, Laura Cannon, who would step in between the two of us. We would try to do the best we could for them.
So I want to go back in a minute and have you tell us a little bit more about Miss Cannon. But did you ever do anything because you were concerned about the safety of Aaron and Pico?
I turned her in, wrote reports to CPS over the kids and the conditions and what was going on with them.
And how many times do you think you made a report to Child Protective Services?
I don't know, 3 or 4, I'm not sure.
But more than once?
Correct.
And over some period of time?
Correct.
And so you mentioned that there was another neighbor who you were friends with. And can you tell us her name again?
Laura Cannon?
And you said that Miss Cannon and you, between the two of you, did the best you could. What did you mean by that?
Well, there was times, because we were all living where we were living, and me and Laura were neighbors, and there was times when, say, I had diapers, she didn't, or she had food, I didn't. We would try to take and do anything possibly we could to take care of the kids. I mean, we even took Pico to the doctor and got medicine for him so that he could get well.
And so you, did Miss Cannon have, so you said that sometimes you would have diapers and sometimes Miss Cannon would have diapers. Did Miss Cannon have any children of her own?
No.
So if she was purchasing diapers at that time, who was she purchasing them for?
Pico and Aaron.
And you said that there was a time where there was a need to take Pico to a doctor. Do you remember what it was? Were you aware that you needed to go to the doctor?
He had been sick for a while, and we had been on Tony about him needing to go see a doctor. And to us, he was getting sicker, so we decided to take him and do what we could do. Laura got the Medicaid card at the time, and we took him. And we went and got medicine for him and gave it to Antoinette to take care of him with.
And to your knowledge, did Antoinette follow through and give him that medicine?
No,
And why do you believe that she did not give him medicine?
because Laura told me that she had looked in the refrigerator and the medicine was still there. And it was still there, it wasn't touched.
So it was something that had to be refrigerated?
Correct. It was amoxicillin, I believe. Were there people in that neighborhood who, well, tell me a little bit about what kind of activity there was in that neighborhood at that time. Okay, it was classified as public housing. So that is what I lived in. And they had a little park down below the hill where kids could go and play. The neighborhood was one way in, one way out. And it had a lot of activity.
And mostly activity of children playing in the playground?
No.
So
Cars. We had a lot of cars coming and going. We had a lot of drug dealing going in the neighborhood.
And when you lived there, were there certain houses that seemed to you as a resident to be more involved in that food activity?
There was two of them that I knew of. There was more later I found out, but there was two of them that I knew of. One was a lady whose son was a big drug dealer, and then the other one was Tony's house. Tony would let people come and go whenever they felt like it, and some of them were the drug dealers.
And do you have any, did you ever have a chance to go inside Antoinette's townhouse or apartment there?
Yes,
And
it was, the shape of it was not kept up. It was whatever was in there was in there. The kids had a bed, but it wasn't the greatest. It was more like a mattress, I remember, on the floor, but it was a bed. And with Pico being as small as he was, it kind of worked, but didn't. And of course there were stairs, and there was nothing protecting from him coming down, or any of them coming down the stairs.
so even though Pico was a baby at the time, he slept on a mattress on the floor as opposed to some sort of crib or,
Correct.
and
Or on the couch.
so, and would Aaron similarly sleep on that same mattress or on the couch with him?
Yes.
And you mentioned that there were times when there was no heat in the home.
Correct.
Do you have any memory of what Antoinette would do for heat when there wasn't heat in the home?
Nothing.
And you mentioned that there some of the sort of safety features that people might have in a home with two young children. Were any of those present in this home?
No.
Did both Aaron and Pico go to daycare?
When they did go to daycare, it was when Tony would get up and put them on the van, but a lot of times they didn't go because she wouldn't get up. Or if they were with me or Laura, we would put them on the van and let them go, and then we would get them off the van. But a lot of times, no.
So they had some sort of daycare arrangement, but sometimes they would still not go.
Correct.
And when they would go, well, let me ask you this. How long did you stay in Harriside?
Oh, honestly, I do not remember. 3 or 4 years.
So were you there longer than, for instance, Miss Laura Cannon?
Correct.
So Laura Cannon moved away before you did.
Right.
And did Tony live there the whole time you lived there?
No.
So you lived there longer than any of these other folks.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time that you were there and Laura Cannon and Tony were both still living there, did you have a chance to see how Travion would interact with both Miss Cannon and with Tony?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about what his type of interaction with Tony as opposed to with Laura?
He was drawn more to Laura. Laura was like a mom to him because she really took care of him. She kind of disciplined him, did what a mom should do. And he was more drawn to her than his own mother. But she would go Tony would go and snatch him up and drag him back. It was just, he really liked Laura.
And when he was older, and was there ever a time when he was older and was able to walk when he would get home from daycare, when you were still all there together? Or was he still too young?
I think he was still too young.
And did you, when you made the reports to Child Protective Services, were you aware of the fact that she had other older children?
No.
Yes.
That Travion was more attached to Miss Cannon than to Antoinette Smith. And I don't know if I asked you, but can you just tell us a little bit of what gave you that impression?
Well, because when he was younger, Tony would try to be, I guess, a mother, but it was more the attitude and not the I'm a mother kind of loving thing. And Laura was more of the loving, okay, I'm going to discipline you when you do something wrong kind of thing, but yet it was you're loved, you're safe kind of attitude versus Tony, because Tony just didn't seem, it seemed more like she was out for money, the check.
And what do you mean by that?
Okay, at the time, if you had a child, you would get money from the state as well as you would get welfare, you would get help. And that's what she seemed to be out for, was more of the food stamps, the checks she would get each month versus really taking care of the kids. Because she would even take her food stamps and would sell them for money. And it would be, usually it's like 50 cents to the dollar. And she would sell them just to get whatever she wanted to eat or to get drugs maybe, or drink.
But you were aware of her sometimes selling the food stamps that she
Yes,
and she got the food stamps because she had the two boys in the home.
correct.
And you mentioned that there was sometimes not food in the house. That was one of the concerns you raised when you made the Child Protective Services reports. But you also mentioned that just now that that Tony would sometimes use the money she got from selling her stamps to get things that she wanted.
Correct.
Is there a difference in sort of how she seemed to act towards the food that she wanted and the food that she wanted?
There was times when she would be eating something and the kids would be like, I'm hungry, can I have something? And she'd be like, no, you ain't getting it, it's mine, go, get away. And we just looked at her, and of course one of us would go, if we had the food or had something, we'd give it to them because they're hungry, they're growing, they need food.
And was there an instance where one of the times that you made a report had to do with having gone into the home because a neighbor, Vincent, had alerted you or Laura to some concerns?
Yes, between the three of us, sometimes if we had food, we would share. And we knew that Tony had some eggs, and Vincent had went over there to get eggs. And the kids were alone. That's what he'd come and tell me, the kids are alone. Can you take them? Sure, I'll take them. I'll do what, whatever needs to be done. And he had to get Laura up because, again, Pico wanted Laura. He really wanted to, that was his mother, so to speak. And so it worked out like that, but it's just upsetting because she wasn't home. Nobody knew where she was at, and the kids were home alone.
And the neighbors didn't find that out because she alerted them to anything. It was because one of the neighbors went in the house to see whether she had any eggs.
Yes,
And that's when the neighbor Vincent found the two kids there completely unsupervised.
correct.
And that's one of the times that you called Child Protective Services.
Yes.
And do you know what Tony would do if she was having trouble getting the boys to go to sleep?
This is what really angered me the most, is if she couldn't get them to go to sleep, she would slip alcohol in their bottles or whatever she could to get them to go to sleep so that they would get tired. Or she would slip some sort of medicine that might have a sleep aid to it so that she could get them to go to sleep so she could do what she wanted to do. Because I remember an incident where she had given one of them a bottle of beer, and I thought it was apple juice till I realized it was beer.
And was that sort of a theme from your perspective that?
When she wanted the kids out of the way, yes. Instead of giving them to one of us, she would do that.
And do you know what happened to Laura?
I was told she was killed by her husband.
Was that after she had moved away from being your neighbor?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Miss James, I'm I'm showing you 3 pictures that have been marked Defendants Exhibits 13, 14, and 15. Can you take just a minute and look at those and see if you can tell what they are?
I recognize 2 of them
Okay.
right off.
And can you tell us the picture that's on the top, which should be Defendants 13? Do you know who both of those people are?
Laura Cannon and Pico.
And is that a fair and accurate picture of how they looked during the time that you were all neighbors to their said?
Yes.
And you said that you recognized another one of the pictures. Can you tell us which exhibit number it is that you're talking about?
13.
13, is that, and can you tell us what that picture is of?
Because that's Pico.
And is that a fair and accurate picture of what he looked like when you all lived there together?
Yes.
And is that a picture that you recognize from Laura Taylor's home?
The first one, yes.
And
The,
if you don't recognize or you can't identify the third picture, ma'am, you can just set it to the side.
thank you.
And Your Honor, at this time, we would ask to publish those 2 pictures to the jury.
Could you turn over and just read the number on the back of the first picture that you referred to? What you're referring to is...
The first one
Yes,
was
ma'am.
number 15,
All right.
And I would obviously also have it in the first.
Okay.
and the second one was 13.
All right. So 13 and 15 are admitted, and yes, you may publish them. Any objection from the staff? You wish to have them handed to the jurors? All right, bailiff, if you pass those to the jurors, and again, you can...
like to call Miss Earl Dean Bailey.
Testimony you give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Please be seated.
Ms. D.
Ms. Bailey, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Earl Bailey, and I'm the grandmother of Travion brother Earl Magruder.
Okay. So, you are Aaron's grandmother.
Yes,
And Aaron is Travion's brother who's closest to him in age.
yes.
And what sort of relationship have you had with Aaron?
Oh, it's been a great relationship. Earl, thank God, was a wonderful young man. Never had no problem with him.
And you know Aaron quite well.
Repeat your question?
And you know Aaron very well.
Yes.
And why do you know Aaron so well?
Car racing from 3 years old till he graduated from Broaden High School. Went to the Marine for 4 years. Married. On his,
And lives in Florida now.
yes.
So, you had Aaron with you pretty much, you said you raised him, so you had him with you pretty much all the time from when he was 3, 4.
Yes.
And, how old was Aaron when you first became aware that he had been born?
16 months old.
16 months.
Yes.
And do you remember how it was that you became aware that he'd been born at 16 months?
Well, I came home one evening and his mother, Tonette, and Aaron was there, and my son, which is Aaron's father, Terrence Magruder, said, Mother, said, this is Tonette and Aaron. I said, yes, I watching television. And he kept repeating the same question. So I just happened to look at him. He said, Mama, this is my son. So I looked, and really he was looking just like him. So,
You knew as soon as you saw Aaron that day that he was your grandson?
yes,
And pretty soon, so you said he was 16 months old when you were first aware that he'd been born.
yes,
And pretty soon after that, you started to help with him.
yes,
And then from 3 on, he was with you all the time.
yes.
Now, being Aaron's grandmother and the person to raise Aaron, did you have some chance to see Travion some when he was born?
Yes.
And did Travion live far away from you?
I was living in the downtown section on Edenton Street, so there's approximately about 3 to 5 miles on Pool Road at the time, to my knowledge, that Travion was living with his father and stepmother.
So once Travion was living with his father and stepmother, you know they were living on Pool Road.
Yes, I don't know as a location, but I hear that's where they were living.
And did you know that, were you aware of them moving around some, or was that basically the one address you knew?
That's the only address I knew, location rather.
And what kind of relationship did Aaron and Travion have when Aaron first came to live with you?
Well, to my knowledge, they had a good relationship. Aaron kind of took Travion under his wing, and whatever he had, he would give it to Travion. And, things changed after he lived with his father.
So were they pretty close when they were little?
Yes.
And are they close in age?
Yes, I think it's about a year and a half or something like that apart.
And did they seem to have a fairly normal relationship for
Far as I know.
and did they for a time go to the same daycare?
Yes.
And did there come a time where they did not go to the same daycare together anymore?
Yes.
And why was that?
Well, to my understanding, Aaron got older and he was going to a Raleigh daycare, and Trayvon's stepmother was working at that daycare that he was previous attendant, and so therefore I guess it made it more convenient for him to go to the daycare his mother was employed at.
And was the daycare that Aaron went to more convenient for you?
Yes.
And so did they not see each other as much after they weren't in daycare together?
Few years went by, and Aaron didn't hear from his brother.
And how did Aaron feel about the fact that he wasn't able to see his brother at all?
It bothered him because they were very close, and so I took it on my behalf to speak to one of the ladies that worked at the daycare that Travion was attending, and also when he returned back to the daycare, because she let me know, and I could bring Aaron so they could spend at least 30 minutes or so, have a little time together. So that went on about a couple of months.
So for several months you were able to bring him, Aaron, so that he could visit?
Yeah, and the saddest thing, Travion didn't even know him. Because the time had passed, 3 years.
So it had been so long by then that Travion didn't remember Aaron?
No.
And how did that make Aaron feel?
He was crying. He was upset. He couldn't believe his own little brother that was so close didn't know him. He's told Aaron, Travion, you don't know who this is, your brother Aaron. And he just didn't know him. 'Cause, like I said, been several years that went by.
And is Travion older or younger?
Younger.
So if Aaron was 3 when he came to live with you, Travion would have been?
I think, like I said, about a year and a half or 2 years apart. I can't even remember Travion's birthday, so I can't, speculate no more than that because I can't remember that.
So he would have been a year and a half or 2 years old?
Yes.
And then there was a fairly long period of time when he didn't see Aaron?
Yes.
And then when you were able to make the arrangements for them to see each other again, Travion didn't remember Aaron?
No.
And you said you made those arrangements through somebody,
Oh, yes, one that lady, Miss Good.
and how did you know Ms. Good?
Well, I met Miss Good when Erin first started going to daycare there. She was one of the teachers there. Well, something like a secretary, did a little everything.
And did she reach out to you about making those arrangements, or did you reach out to her?
Yes, yes.
But Michael Clark wasn't involved in
No,
helping?
no. His wife, Jack, was, like I said, was one of the teachers there.
Okay. And did, when Aaron was growing up, did he have a chance to go and spend time with his other brothers in Franklin?
Yes. On vacation every time they went on vacation, Erin went with them.
And would he stay with them other times besides?
Oh, yeah, on weekends, church function, yes.
Would he sometimes go and stay for longer than a night?
Yeah, he would spend weekend, and they would go out of town for a week on, summer vacation. So he was very blessed that way.
And was that something that you tried to make a priority?
Oh, yes. It was very important to me that Earl had good communication with his brother.
And did you tell me a little bit about the relationship you had with Michael Clark during those years that he was raising Travion and you were raising Aaron?
Well, I asked Mike, would he let Trayvon and Aaron spend weekend together so they could get to, stay in touch and keep their close relationship going. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen, so I don't know the answer to that.
And would you have been able to have Travion over to stay? Did you have a big enough home?
Oh, yes, yes.
And do you remember, how many times do you remember talking to Mr. Clark about that through the years?
A couple times, maybe.
And you say that during this time you were living a few miles away from each other.
Yes.
And Aaron's other brothers were farther away.
Yeah, they live in Franklin at the
But
time.
you were able to maintain some better connections with them.
Yeah, be honest with you, I just couldn't get no me or Louise could not get no communication with Mike, with Trayvon. And I think that was a bigger problem for him, for Trayvon, because he missed his brothers.
And you say Louise. Who's Louise?
Louise is Trayvon's grandmother on his mother's side.
And did you ever have a chance to see, so you told us a little bit about the time period where you saw Travion with some regularity at the daycare when you would set up those visits between him and you told us that at first Travion didn't remember Aaron, but those visits you say went on for about a month.
Couple months.
Couple months. So can you tell us how they seemed to be together after that first?
Oh, they were happy, laughing, joking.
And so you told us a little bit about sort of that period of time and spending time with Travion when you would bring him for those visits. And were there other times that you saw Travion after that, between when he was 2 and now?
Yes, I think it was about 10 he came by. I don't know who had brought him. And Aaron gave him 7 pair of jeans and shirt, and he was just outside. I was so excited. He said, "Boy, you hooked me up." And a few years went by before we saw him again. And he came by one day, and he had hooked school. And I fed him, and I said, "Now you know, you definitely need to be in school. Go home, and please stay in school and stay out of trouble."
So those were the 2 main times you
Yes.
remember seeing him?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit more about the time that he came, when you remember Aaron giving him those clothes. Do you remember why it was that Aaron gave him so many pairs of jeans and shirts that day?
Yes, because Aaron was just like a screen baby. He just grew so fast.
So he had.
And he had outgrown them, so he wanted a brother to have them.
And you said, you told us a little bit about Travion's reaction. Was Travion really happy to get
Yes,
those?
yes.
So you didn't have a lot of interaction with him. Did you ever see him up in Franklinton?
No.
And would you take Aaron to Franklinton for family function?
Yes, but most of Aaron's Aunt Binky would meet me halfway or tell me where she could what, and then sometime I would take him down there myself, depending on the situation. 'Cause I work all the time.
Right. Because you still work.
Yes.
And do you work easy hours?
Well, I work crazy hours. Like last night I worked a dozen hours and came home to be here.
Right. We appreciate it.
Yes.
But even working all those hours, you were able to coordinate with the folks in Franklinton.
Yes. Still do.
And even if it was that someone had to come and meet you halfway,
Yes.
there was always a way to figure out how to do it.
Yes.
Yes.
And Ms. Bailey, you have, you're from Raleigh, right?
Yes.
And so you're in a situation where you sort of know a lot of the folks in the different generations of Travion's family, as well as the folks up in Franklinton. You know a lot of the different folks that are involved in these families, right?
Yes.
And do you know Travion's grandmother?
Yes. Louise Smith.
Well, do you know his grandmother on his father's side?
Yes.
And
Christina.
Christiana.
Yes.
And do you know Travion's father?
Yes, I know of Michael.
And you've mentioned talking to him through the years.
Yes.
And what's his name?
Michael Jenkins, I think he going Jenkins. That was his mother maiden name, I think it was.
Okay. Christiana's name.
I think so.
And so you knew him as being Christiana's son, and later you knew that same person that you knew as Christiana's son was Travion's father.
Yes.
And through your years of knowing Christiana, who is Travion's grandmother, have you been aware of any issues or problems that she's had?
Yes. Shortly after she graduated from high school in Zebulon, North Carolina, she met a few years later. She met Michael father, June Piltman, and they moved up north. They would come home during the summer, and she stayed with her people. He would stay with his. And over the years, they had a little girl. Mike had a sister, and one time they came home, and June Pittman dropped them off and never came back. And Christiana had a nervous breakdown, and as you know the results of that. For decades, she been out there on the streets.
So you say out there on the streets?
Oh, like as a bad person, or how you want to describe it?
She's been homeless for
Yes.
an extended period of time.
Yes.
And
Several decades.
several decades. And to your knowledge, has she ever been able to work or do anything like that since?
Not since that situation occurred, to my knowledge.
And as you say, that was several decades ago.
Yes.
Cross-examination. Mr. Waller.
Ms. Bailey, good afternoon to you, ma'am.
Yes.
You sound like a proud grandma of Aaron.
Yes, I am.
You said he graduated from Broughton.
Yes, and went in the Marine 4 years, and he married, got a little 6-year-old daughter.
What's he do now?
He going to school to be a barbers, and you had to talk to him about his future plans. That's what he currently doing right now.
Is he one of these gentlemen back here
Yes,
in the
yes,
courtroom dressed
yes.
in suit and tie?
Yes.
All right. And Miss Bailey, so just to be clear, Aaron and Travion they share a mother, same mother.
Yes.
Okay. And at some point you got Aaron out of Antoinette's house.
No, it didn't happen like that.
How'd it happen?
She brought him to me when he was 3 years old, and she said she had got padlocked from her apartment, and would I keep him till she could find a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I hesitated at first, cause scared the hell out of me, to be honest with you, cause the job I got, I'm on a point system. It don't matter how long you've been there, you know, you point out, that's your job. And my sister, Geraldine, told me she would help me, so I went on and took the responsibility.
So you and Geraldine,
Bailey, my sister, yes.
did y'all live together?
Yes,
Okay. So y'all took Aaron in when he was about 3 years old.
yes,
And you know that shortly thereafter, Travion left Antoinette's home as well and went and lived with his father.
yes.
So he was removed from that situation himself.
But to my knowledge, I had to be honest with you, that was, we call it Tonette decision to let Mike take care of Travion, because she thought at the time that she told me that since she didn't have nowhere to take him, that his father would be the answer for him.
And I'm sorry, I probably should remove probably isn't the right word, but Travion went to live with his father. He
Yes.
got out of the situation
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about kind of your household there, Miss Bailey. You said that you work a lot. What kind of work do you do?
I work for Kellogg's in Cary.
Okay, what type of work do you do for Kellogg's?
I'm a packer. They make toast crackers, cheese crackers, cereal. Yeah.
And you said you live with Geraldine as well? Geraldine?
No, at the time.
At the time you did. And was she working at the time?
Yeah, she worked at Wake Medical Center
Okay.
in
What type?
physical therapy.
In physical therapy?
Yes.
Was she a doctor, assistant?
No, assistant.
Okay. Anybody else live there in the household with you and Geraldine and Aaron?
No, not at that time. But Geraldine kept her grandson for her daughter to work third shift.
And
See, I worked third shift. Geraldine worked first shift. So that's why I was able to work out for the both of us.
And so, who, at some point, did Geraldine move out of the house and it was just you and Aaron?
No, that when we separate a household, Aaron was like 10 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he stayed with you?
Yes.
Okay. So, Miss Bailey, you said that at some point when Travion was 10 years old that Aaron gave him some clothes?
Yes, several pair of jeans, shirts that he outgrow.
And then a couple years later, Travion came back by the house.
Yes, he had hooked school. I fed him and I told him he had to stay in school, go back home, behave, and do right.
But you said at that point he'd already quit school.
No, he
What'd you
was about 12 years old. I didn't see him again till he was about 15. Came by looking for his brother, Earl.
And had he quit school at that point?
I do not know, because like I said, years have passed, so I didn't know what his situation was.
And was that the last time you saw Travion when he was about 15 years
Yes.
old? Okay.
Yes.
Had any interaction with him
No.
since then?
No.
You mentioned growing up that him and Aaron were kind of tight, and that
Yes.
Aaron would take him under his wing.
Yes.
And when they got into the teenage years, I know that they didn't see each other that much, but would your grandson, the one that you're proud of, would he have been willing to help Travion out in any way he could have?
Well, To my knowledge, and he in court, he can answer this question too. He will always find them and tell them, please stay in school, stay out of, don't get involved with the gang. Do right, man. Do something with your life. He can verify that.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I don't have any
Yes.
further questions.
Yes.
Redirect? All right, thank you, ma'am. You may
Yes.
step down.
Yes.
Further evidence for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call next Dan Biermann.
You get your place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Ms. D.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. My name is Dan Biermann, Daniel Biermann. I live in outside of Asheville, North Carolina, in Fairview, and I am here to talk about whatever these folks ask me about.
And how did you come to be involved in this?
You all contacted me, you and Mr. Braun, and asked me to review the records and render an opinion.
And what records were those?
Those were records from the Wake County Department of Social Services regarding your client from a period of 1991 to 95.
And did they involve anybody besides him?
And they involved his mother and his brother.
And do you remember the name of the brother that's also involved in those records?
Aaron.
And what qualifies you to review that?
Well, several things qualify me. My education, which I'll mention and describe a little bit, and you can go further with that as you will. I have an undergraduate degree from St. Andrews Presbyterian College in Laurinburg, North Carolina. From there, I went to a joint degree program at the Divinity School at Princeton and the Graduate School of Social Work at Rutgers, both in New Jersey. In that, so those were both professional programs that gave me a foundation to understand human behavior and other issues about how people behave and why and in different contexts. That was something I was interested in. I've also, my undergraduate, I was a politics major, so I've always been interested in public policy. From there, in the practical world, I began to learn, and this is when I was at the Graduate School of Social Work at Rutgers. I had an award to work in a project that was funded by the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, their Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And it was a prevention project in Trenton, New Jersey, and I began to learn about how to keep young people out of difficult situations, the juvenile justice, criminal justice, and mental health worlds through through creative programming that was sort of upstream, if you will, and so those were my academic. That was my academic experience. When I left the school world, came back to North Carolina, and began working. Had spent 4 years in sort of a clinical world of social work. I worked at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center. I was in the pediatrics department. I was a full-time faculty member there, and doing hundreds of evaluations of young people, children usually under the age of 6, about whom there was some question or concern about their development and some problem in their development. I then spent a year working at the Child Guidance Clinics doing psychiatric evaluations and treatment. So I began to develop a sort of a clinical interest in what happens with young people as they develop. What do they need? How do we deal with their deficits? How do we help empower their parents to provide the best possible place for them to grow? I went from there to the Department of Social Services in 1981, 80 I believe it was actually, and I went there because a grant that I was operating under ended, and I ended up being there and beginning to learn more about what they did. I'd never worked in that setting before. So I was there for 21 years. And in that time, I learned a great deal about how child welfare systems work, how all of these safety net programs that are a combination of federal and state and local funding there to help people who have challenges in their life, how those worked. That then led me to being invited to join the faculty of the social work program at UNC Greensboro. I was an assistant professor in the joint Master of Social Work program. It was a joint program between North Carolina A&T and UNC Greensboro, and I came there specifically to focus on teaching students how to work in the child welfare system.
So at the time of your retirement, you were working as a professor at UNC Greensboro.
That's correct.
And prior to being full-time at UNC Greensboro teaching in the social work school, you spent 21 years, I think you said, at the Department of Social Services in Forsyth County.
Correct.
And during the time that you were in Forsyth County, were you in a supervisory role part of that time?
Yes, I was in supervisory role actually all of that time.
And so did you have some direct experience working with families while you were also working in a supervisory capacity?
Well, yes, I did a variety of things. That's a world in which you can't not be directly involved because of the nature of the work. But I was pretty intentional in my involvement in that I one of the things I learned as a direct worker was that it was really, as when I was a line worker, that it was really important to have supervisors who knew what they were talking about and who knew what I was doing and who knew what the obstacles were. So I made a point of regularly going into the field with my social workers, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. I learned from it every time I went. I did the same with my grad students and would go out with them and ask and that was in probably 15 or 20 counties in North Carolina, would ask them to take me on a home visit and show me how you do it.
So you had both direct experience working with families in need of protective service, as well as teaching countless social workers here in North Carolina, and also supervising other social workers there in Forsyth County.
That's correct.
And when you first went to UNC Greensboro, it was part of the Child Welfare Education Collaborative?
Yes.
And can you just tell us a bit about what that is, or was?
Sure, and it's still around in altered form, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about context and why it was there. The period from about the time I came to the Department of Social Services until I would say somewhere in the early 2000s was a very difficult and challenged time for in that world. There was huge, and I'm going to talk now real specifically about child welfare, which involves child protective services, foster care, adoptions. Those safety net programs that are there to take care of young folk who for whom there has been some complaint of abuse or neglect, who might need an alternative place to live outside of their family. That world had huge problems, high caseloads, huge turnover, and I say huge being about a third of the staff turning over each year, and that created real problems in service. So our job was to try to to put into that system people who were better trained and who had a higher likelihood of staying to provide those services.
And so you were involved, I think you told us that you came to work for Forsyth County DSS in 1980 or 1981.
80, yeah.
And so you've been involved in the changes to how social services are delivered in North Carolina as part of your work at Forsyth County and as part of your work at the teaching the social work in the social work.
Yeah. Yes.
UNC Greensboro.
Yes.
And the Child Welfare Education Collaborative was part of that ongoing effort to change how the services were provided.
Yes, it was a 6-university consortium. It was a statewide effort to provide more skilled people who might stay in that child welfare world longer.
And have you received any awards in the field of social work?
Yes, I got in 1996 or 7. I was awarded the Advocate of the Year from the North Carolina chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, and in 2009, they for reasons that I don't fully understand, said that I was their Social Worker of the Year, which I was very flattered to be recognized, but I'm just doing my job.
And have you worked with the North Carolina legislature to work on issues around social work reform?
Yes, we've worked on issues related back to licensure of social work, general legal regulation, title protection, and then in the mid-90s, I was appointed to a legislative study commission on the impending welfare reform, and served at that level as well.
And have you have you been tendered as an expert in any of the courts in North Carolina?
Yeah, yes.
And where has that been?
In Wake County and Duplin County.
And was that in Superior Court?
Superior Court in both, yes.
And you provided me a copy of your CD,
Yes.
which you can provide it to the state. And at this time, Your Honor, I would tender Mr. Biermann as an expert in the area of social work and child welfare.
Any objection? His testimony will, excuse me, will be received as proffered.
So before turning to some of the specific records and issues that Mr. Brown and I asked you to review in preparing for this trial, can you tell us a little bit about how the terms abuse and neglect are used in the context of child welfare?
Yes. And you ask me that, I think, because it can be confusing, and I'll try to simplify it. We use those terms. First of all, we look to the state statutes, but rather than describe them, used generally this way, that abuse is something that professionally we look for using the legal definition where there is something that you can see. There are bruises, there is a broken bone, there is a black eye, there is some evidence that there has been physical abuse of a child. The neglect is often something you can't see because it's a failure on the part of a caregiver to provide the kind of protection that a child needs to do the sort of basic tasks of growing up. So often what looks like abuse really is defined by the departments of social services as neglect because of it's got there are elements there's not enough that you can see to define it as abuse unless you have somebody who is a witness to that abuse that will say to you, I saw this person twist this child's arm and break it. Well, then that would be very clear, a clear sense of who did that.
And the issue of who did that can be a major issue in the course of the investigation.
That's right.
So there can be an injury, but a lack of clarity as to how the injury was.
That's right. And when that happens, what looks like abuse to most folks ends up being defined in the social service world as neglect because it is something you may be able to see some evidence that a child has a bruise, for example, but you don't know where it came from. And you don't know who did it, and you're looking to make sure the child has good caregiver, so you say, well, the caregiver neglected to...
So the label then becomes neglect because the failure on the part of the caregiver is clear, and whoever might have given the injury is unclear.
Correct.
So, Mr. Biermann, I know we've already mentioned this a little bit, but you were asked to review some records in this case.
Yes.
And to clarify, the records that you were asked to review all pertain to Antoinette, she was Smith at that time, and her two youngest children, Aaron Smith and Travion Smith.
That's correct.
And what is the time period contained in the records you were asked to review?
They started in December of 1991, and they ran through to April of 1995.
Okay. And looking at those records, are there specific dates on the reports of suspected abuse or neglect?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of those records?
Yes, I do.
And do those records have some handwritten page numbers on them?
Yes, they do, at the bottom of the page.
And would it be helpful if, during our conversation, either of us needs to refer to a page, we could refer to it by the page number that's
Yes.
referred to with the records? So, based on those records, do you know when Travion was born?
Yes. He was born December 6th, 1992.
Now, can you tell me the specific dates that are on the records that you were asked to review?
Yes. The
dates-
first,
Reports of abuse and neglect, I should have clarified.
yes.
Yeah.
With one caveat, I'll go through and get the first one, yes. Do you want me to tell you the dates?
Yeah, if you could
Okay.
just tell us the dates.
The first one was, in the record, was 12/30/91. The second was 7/24/92. Now, the remaining two were investigated as one. It's 1/24/94 and 2/16/94.
Was there a report in 1993?
Yes, did I say it? Not, I must have skipped that, sorry. 10/28/93. I'd underlined something that distracted my...
The dates on the reports that you were asked to review were 12/30/1991, 7/24/1992, 10/28/1993, and then there were two reports, one from 1/24/94 and one from 2/16/94 that
Right.
were investigated together. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
But there were, okay, but there were actually two separate reports, but there were not two separate investigations.
That's right. The record for the 1/24/94 referral, it says on the record that it got lost in the office. So by the time they found it, or at the time they found it, another report had come in, and it appears that they investigated those two reports as one.
So 5 reports, depending on how you want to count them, 4 or 5 reports, but we'll just say 5, was prior to Travion's mother's pregnancy with him. Is that correct?
The 12/30/91, yes.
So the report after 12/30/91, 7/24/1992, that's during a time when Antoinette Smith would have been pregnant with Travion.
Correct.
And obviously for the remaining reports, Travion was alive.
Yes.
So those 4 later reports, I would like to have be the focus of our conversation. There might be a few questions that refer back to that earlier report, but basically we'll be talking about those 4 later reports. You've already told us a bit about the issues pertaining to employee turnover in the Department of Social Services offices around this time. So does that mean that more than one social worker would generally interact with a family?
Yes, generally there would be a social worker that would contact the family upon the receipt of an allegation of abuse or neglect. That social worker would go to the home, see the child, make other contacts, and determine if the child was safe and do essentially an evaluation and make recommendations. May work with the family on a short-term basis. And if they needed longer-term work, there would be another social worker, what was in those days called a treatment social worker, and the case would be transferred to that worker to accomplish longer-term goals.
So one of the phrases that we read in these reports is that a report of an abuse or neglect is either substantiated or unsubstantiated.
Correct.
So would the difference of whether or not the case got transferred to another worker have anything to do with whether or not the allegation had been substantiated?
Yes, the case would have to be substantiated to be given to another worker for longer-term work.
And so there were, just based on the sort of approach that was in place where one worker would come in, investigate the initial complaint, and then if abuse or neglect was substantiated, the case would be transferred to a second worker, right? So that's
Correct.
the basic structure.
That was basic structure.
And there were also some issues, I think you said, about there being a turnover in the field at the time.
That's correct.
So with those multiple people being involved in any given case, are there safeguards that have to be in place so that issues and won't fall through the cracks in a given case?
There are, and they're important. The safeguards, they're safeguards they're structural safeguards, and then there are kind of personal, human safeguards. And let me describe them. The first one is just the record itself. The record is a safeguard because it has history. And one of the things that I learned in my early days in pediatrics is you have to have good history to get good outcomes. And you have to use your history and read your history. So the record is an important safeguard. What I encourage my students to do and my workers to do was make sure you know what's in the record. So that's safeguard number one. Safeguard number two is the supervisor. The supervisor is there to assist the worker in getting their work done, but they're to sort of overview and make sure the worker is using good methods and has identified the higher risk families and is doing the appropriate kinds of interventions. There are structural safeguards. For example, a worker would have, particularly during this time, a standard caseload recommended nationally would have been about 10 cases per Child Protective Service worker. At the point in time in looking at these records, where these records were happening, the caseloads were probably 3 times that. They were probably averaging around 30. You can't do great work, but you can do some work. So what the supervisors were doing is they would get a list every month of who has what cases, would review those with them, look at the time frames, because this service operates under some strict time frames, make sure the time frames were being observed, make sure that the work was being done, and that the cases were being closed or transferred in a timely process.
So these type of skills, like the importance of producing a useful record, those are the type of skills that you taught when you worked at the social work school in Greensboro.
Yes, and part of what we taught was, if it doesn't get written down, it didn't happen. Because part of what we have to be able to do is, if there's a question about what we've done, it needs to be evidenced in the record. And it's interesting to look at records in Wake County. They're very similar all over every place I've looked, but there are a number of places where you can document things. So sometimes it's written, it's typed out narratives, sometimes it's just little handwritten notes, but as long as it's in there, that's what we taught was crucial. And that was what the state, that was the state of North Carolina, who oversees all of these county departments of social services. That was their standard as well.
So to be clear, each social worker who worked on the case involving Antoinette Smith and her children should have had knowledge about what had happened and what had been reported previously.
Yes.
So I want to now turn to these 4 reports that happened from the time Antoinette is pregnant with Travion until this case is closed.
Okay.
So what's the date of that first report, just so we're all together on the same page?
The date of the first report is that you wanted to review was 7/29/92.
And who makes that report, and what's the nature of the report?
The nature of the report, it's made by Mr. Miles, who is identified as I believe a brother, and I'm not sure whose brother he is, but he's somebody it's a family member, and there is a it reports that Aaron has been visiting with family members, and that they have noticed in the course of that visit that there were some cigarette burns on his upper body and leg, and that he had what looked to be a black eye, or the remnants of a black eye. The description was that these looked like they might be a little old, but that was the allegation. Now, I did note that in the record, they couldn't initially find the record of the first report that had happened in '91, but apparently they did find it at some point. So they didn't have the benefit of that earlier report when they received this.
Okay. And what would have been some of the information that they would have had with them if they had been able to find the first report when they began looking at the allegations in the second report?
Well, the first report involved, the '91 report involved allegations of Antoinette leaving her children for long periods of time, once in the care of a 12-year-old. So they would have had the benefit of that information.
And would they have known that she had other children?
They, in the report, and I have to look and see which one, but in one of these there is a mention that she has 2 other children that are in the care of family elsewhere.
So when the worker started to process the allegations in the complaint on the 7/29/92 report, if that person had available in front of them the allegations from 12/30/91, they would know that she had 2 older children who were not in her care.
Correct.
And they would know that there had been some prior issues of her leaving the children completely unsupervised and perhaps with a 12-year-old.
Correct.
And if you look at page B2815, which is the narrative section related to the report from 7/29/92, you read that top line. Does it give you does it refresh your recollection of what the relationship between this complainant and Aaron was?
Complainant reports that his sister, now I still found that confusing in terms of whose sister that was.
So the complainant's sister had recently learned that she had a grandchild.
Right.
And that grandchild was Aaron.
That's what it looked like, but it's still written in a vague fashion to me.
Okay. So these were some paternal family members of Aaron's
Right.
who were concerned about him having what appeared to be a black eye and cigarette burns.
Correct.
And are abuse or neglect substantiated at this time?
The worker visited Antoinette and Aaron. They were at that time living in the family shelter at the Salvation Army. The worker, after his contacts and with consultation with his supervisor, substantiated neglect, and his comments were related to the substantiation of that, and it relates to your earlier question, that the cigarette burns looked, while they looked intentional, and he described why he thought they were intentional, they did look old, and he listened to Antoinette's story about what happened, went and tried to find a person that she had left him in care with could not find that person, and subsequently said, we then will substantiate for neglect.
So the worker went and had a conversation with Antoinette,
Correct.
and Antoinette said, well, somebody else was taking care of him,
That's right.
and that person must be responsible for these burns.
And you described what she said that person had said to her about how these injuries happened.
And then the worker wasn't able to find that person to get any other information.
Correct.
And at that point, it appears that he substantiated the neglect allegation.
Correct.
And did the investigator ever have a chance to follow up with that person with whom Antoinette said she had left the children, or was that never a part of his evaluation?
He did make efforts and went to the physical location that she described, but was not able to find that person.
So now there is a case open, and does that case get transferred to the other type of worker that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, it does, and again, that would be one of those where the new worker is going to read what's been written by the investigations worker, including, and just add including comments about his observation that it appeared that bonding between the mother and the child seemed to be kind of weak from his perspective. And this is somebody who goes out and sees people, sees the bonds between mothers and children all the time. So I value what folks who do that say. So he transfers it to social worker Cynthia Johnson in September of '92. She's a CPS treatment worker.
And Cynthia Johnson would have had the benefit of reading the prior report.
Yes.
So she would have read the investigation surrounding the 729 report that was made by Aaron's paternal family about the cigarette burns and the black eye.
Yes.
And she would have also had the benefit of reading the prior report. And if you just go back, just briefly, if you go back to page B, an easy place to find it, B2809. And you look there still sort of towards the top where it says who the complainant was for the 12/30/91 complaint.
Yes.
Can you read that person's name? It's hard to read. Does
Yes.
it look like it might say Quentin Bullock?
Quentin.
Quentin Bullock.
Okay.
And that's the report that talked about her just like leaving the children for extended periods of time without appropriate supervision.
That's right.
And so Cynthia Johnson would have had the ability to review both of these reports when she takes over as the social worker handling the case in 1992.
That's correct.
Now, what were the categories from your reading of the record that Cynthia Johnson identified as being categories with which Antoinette Smith needed some assistance at this time?
Well, because Ms. Smith was at the shelter, this is not an environment where it's designed as short-term temporary housing for people in crisis. So she worked with Ms. Smith to begin a process of finding appropriate housing for Ms. Smith and her child, and that was where her initial effort seemed to be, was finding housing, a perfectly appropriate and good thing to do to get them stable and able to sort of move on into a better future.
And she is successful in finding housing for her.
It appears in the record that sometime in January that housing was obtained.
So it took about 6 months, but she was able to help her find housing.
Yes.
And were there any other categories that
that she mentioned or seemed to focus on during this early phase of sort of being involved with Antoinette?
There are a couple of things. One was during that time, she did have conversations with Antoinette about the possibility of Aaron living with his grandmother. It's not clear from the record whether that happened. This record is, in parts of it are very full and rich, and parts of it are sparse and very undetailed. But so she did that, and she also, once housing was obtained, there was some assistance provided to obtain beds and furniture and things of that sort. So it was focused on getting a stable place to live.
And perhaps finding an alternative place for Aaron to be besides the shelter while the housing arrangements were made.
It was mentioned, like I say, I don't know whether that happened or not.
Ms. D, we're going to break for lunch. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be in recess until 2:30. Please recall all the rules and instructions I've given you throughout. If you'll leave your notebooks in your chairs and gather in the deliberation room at 2:30. Everyone else, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves.